It's time for Push2Plat, your weekly trophy podcast with Mindi and CJ.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to episode 46 of Push2Plat. Look, it is a big week, listeners. Finally, this day has come, Mindi. I can't believe it. You must be ecstatic.
I'm thrilled. I've been trying to do this for so long. Finally, the day of CJ's reckoning is here.
It is. But look, we've got to, what are we talking about, listeners? This might be your first show. You might be like, what is going on? Well, let me set the scene here, yeah? We are thinking 2D, listeners. We are thinking sometimes 2.5D. We are thinking rarely 3D, or so I'm told. You might embark on this journey, a journey of exploration, of guided non-linearity, of utility-gated exploration. What words? This is fantastic. And look, if you don't know what that is, that's where you explore enough so you can move forward on this journey. So are you with me, listeners? We're on a 2D. We're exploring. We're moving forward. There are branching paths everywhere. You're going to get lost. There are so many variations here. You're going down this path. You're looking at this, but now you're heading over here because you can't get to that bit yet. And then you're thinking about the cart and, what's happening. You're adding all these things here. And then what happens, listeners? Well, the frustration probably sets in then, because there's too many things going on, yeah? You can't grind. You can't make yourself stronger in this situation. You just have to rely on skill and this continual exploration and this continual, yes.
It's not going to make this end quicker.
Well, just hang on a second. This continual exploration. So listeners, if this has ever happened to you, if you're saying yes, this sounds familiar, I've had this experience, then you too have shopped on the PSN store. I'm also told this experience has a lot of similarities with Metroidvanias, Mindi, which is, I think, what we're discussing today.
It is! Yay!
Look, listeners, just before we get into this exciting topic that Mindi has been waiting for and our wonderful guest today, I'm just going to do a very, very quick little bit of housekeeping at the start. We released last week a new offshoot or a spin-off podcast, if you like, Push2Plat Level Cap, podcast aimed at smashing the cap, a pure trophy and achievement hunting podcast with Cool Kid Joe and myself. It's a short format podcast of 30 minutes, totally aimed and designed to improve our level score and your level score. It is now out on all providers. If that so interests you, please check it out. I also want to put the warning here, not the fear, just the warning that we will be releasing and launching a Patreon. By the time you listen to this, the Patreon will be live, but it will not be taking any charges until March. So if you do sign up, be aware that it won't make any charges till March. I don't want to go into all the tiers and stuff, but there's plenty there for you to look at. Mindi and I have put a lot of effort into this work, and I'm sure you found some enjoyment over the past year. It is now time for us to ask for a little of your help so that we can continue to make some fantastic content and reach out to guests, wonderful guests all around the world. So that's all I'm going to say about it. If it's something that interests you, you can find the link in the show notes. We'll remind you again in the next couple of weeks about that. So, Mindi, all the housework is done. Why don't we start? Why don't we introduce our guest? And I'm going to let you do the honors because this is such a big moment for you.
Oh, no pressure, right? No pressure. No pressure. All right, well, as regular listeners know, I've been, how do I put this diplomatically? I've been threatening CJ that I will bring someone who knows about Metroidvanias onto the show. And so I kind of looked around, I found someone. If anyone watches kind of retro game shows on YouTube, there's one called GameSack that's been going on for quite a bit. So I brought on the host, Joe Redifer, to talk Metroidvanias with us today. Joe, how are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. So, let's start at the beginning. We ask every guest origin of the meaning behind their PSN name. For you, I want to go a little different. Why GameSack?
Why GameSack? Well, I created the show with a friend, Dave, nearly 10 years ago. And we're guys, we're immature. So we were thinking of how can we be I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but how can we be silly without being obscene? So we came up with different names like Game Squirt, but we were like, no, that's a little too pushing it a little bit too much. So we came up with GameSack, where it can be taken a few different ways, and we just kind of stuck with that and just literally recorded the first episode like 10 minutes after we came up with that name.
Do you remember, just off the top of your head, do you remember what your first episode was and why you chose that to be the first episode?
The first episode was the Super Nintendo Super Scope versus the Sega Genesis Menacer, which are the two light guns for each of the system. And we chose that episode because we were hanging out at Dave's house and we could see the boxes, and that was the first thing that we came to our mind. Hey, let's talk about those.
Well, because that was, and I know Dave's not on the show anymore, but
No,
because that was a huge thing, right? Like Dave is all about Super Nintendo, right? And you're the Sega guy.
right.
Has that kind of dynamic changed since it's just you running GameStack now?
Well, people still think I'm just the Sega guy, but the truth of the matter is that either of us are willing to play games from any system, and we love it no matter what, just as long as the game is fun. Dave has more Genesis games than I do, a lot more, and he has at least as many Sega Saturn and Dreamcast games.
Mhm.
So he might be just as big of a Sega fan as I am. He does have more Nintendo games than I do, but during high school, it was kind of a thing where, he was the Nintendo guy, I was the Sega guy, so we kind of just went with that when we started the show.
So I guess let's start. I guess the beginning. What's your gaming background? When did you start? What's your history? What's your story?
Well, I started playing in the arcades like most people who are ancient like myself, with like Pac-Man. Miss Pac-Man was one of my favorites. Same with Kangaroo, and what else was there? Cubert. Love that stuff. And that's basically all I ever played back in those days. Eventually a friend got an Atari 2600 and played that. That was really cool. But I never had my own system. At one point, my dad got one of those Pong consoles. I didn't live with my dad at the time because he and my mom got divorced when I was 2. But I would play it when I went over to his house, and he eventually gave that to me, and I played it every once in a while. There's not much you can do with a Pong console. And but my first game system that I bought myself was the Sega Master System. And I bought that with Christmas money I had saved up, and along with 2 games, along with allowance money, and I was just like in seventh heaven or whatever. It is just amazing. And I chose that over the Nintendo basically because I liked Sega's games in the arcade, and I didn't see much in the arcade that was on the NES at the time. So I was just like, Sega has more of the stuff that I'm enjoying in the arcade, so that's why I chose them. And then once the Genesis came out, I bought that. Once the Super Nintendo came out, I bought that. I didn't get an NES of my own until I want to say 15 years ago. But basically, I've just been keeping up with the game systems ever since. I've tried to buy pretty much everything except for the Atari stuff. I've never bought a Jaguar. I do have a Lynx, only recently.
Why no Jaguar? Just anti-Jaguar?
It just didn't appeal to me. And this is coming from a guy who spent $700 on the 3DO when it launched.
Ooh.
Yeah. And so the Jaguar comes out, and it's just like, yeah, I just, there was nothing about it that made me want to buy it.
I had a neighbor growing up who, her dad was in tech or something, so she had like all of these old systems, and I'm sure she doesn't have them anymore. But she had one of those. I want to say it's the 3DO, but I don't know. Maybe you can tell me. The game I remember playing on it was called Voyeur.
Oh, that's probably 3DO. Yeah.
Was it a 3DO? It was a really cheesy. I mean, they're all cheesy, and that's why I love them. FMV game where you're like really a voyeur because you're like a private detective.
Right.
Right? And you're like taking pictures through this woman's window to prove that she's cheating on her husband or something. I don't know. I don't remember. We were too young to play it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't recall if I played that one or not. I never rented it or owned it, but I know what you're talking about. And I remember you're a private detective. And I'm like, well, why call it voyeur then? So,
Because you're taking pictures through windows, and it's I actually looked it up a couple of years ago, and it borders on kind of softcore porn.
oh, does it?
Yeah. that kind of old Cinemax,
Yeah.
you know.
I know they had like on 3DO, even at the video game rental shop, you could rent a game. Well, it wasn't a game, but it was called Sex. And there was like mild nudity in it. And it's like you could rent it from the video game store, which I thought was crazy. And it's just videos on the disc.
Interesting. So, look, I'm going to jump in here. I'm often reminded of just how old Mindi is by her knowledge of this period. And
shut
it's
up!
wonderful that we have someone of her vintage here today as well to discuss these things. There's a lot of words here that I don't understand. But I do want to ask you, I mean, you're definitely, no, we'll get into your preferred topic and interest later on, but you're a retro gamer. That's fair to say. You're very passionate about it. What do you think about, because, our audience is primarily, more of a modern gaming audience. I know we have some that are very big retro fans, but what's your opinion, and I know this is a massive question in a way, but what's your opinion of the directions games have taken, and do you like these modern games now, or do you prefer going back to the retro games?
Well, I think it depends on my mood. I like, a lot of modern games, they try to be movies, they try to be like these big, giant, epic things. I don't feel that everything needs to be big and epic. Things that I come back to the most are things that are easy to, just pull down from the shelf and plug in and play without having to worry about, relearning all the complex controls and stuff like that, or go through a long, lengthy, that's redundant tutorial and whatnot. But at the same time, those games are cool. It's just that you really only play through them once. If you're going for a platinum, then you stay with it until you get the platinum, then you put it on the shelf, you never ever play it again. So I prefer games that I want to pull down like in a few years from now and just, play it again, maybe for an hour, maybe for 12 hours, who knows. But that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the games that you only play once. I have plenty of those. I went through all the Uncharteds and tried to platinum those and had tons of fun. I don't regret playing those at all, and I don't play them again. So there's that too.
That's a very interesting point, because you're right. I mean, we talked in the past, as listeners know, about some of these games that are releasing now are so bloated that, the core part of the game is really, maybe 20% of the actual game. So you're not going to replay, 50 or 100 hours of this thing just to get that gaming loop. Whereas I find it, again, this is not my area, but I find with these retro games, the game loop seems to be the thing. It's there, it's immediate, and it's I don't want to say necessarily refined, but it's a much smaller experience overall. So maybe there's a lot tied up in that as well with these new games. There's just so much extra garbage that we don't need. What I'm interested in is that the retro gaming time was a time of skill. What do you think has happened to the modern gamer? Have we lost the skill required to beat the games as they used to be? Or do you not see that?
I really don't think so, because I'll tell you, I'm a lot better at retro games now than I was back in the day. I don't know what it is, but I'm much more able somehow to complete a lot of these games where I couldn't even get past stage 3 or 4 back when they came out. I don't know what it is, but I still find modern games these days, challenging. Not everyone, or not every single game, mind you, but they're still pretty challenging. They can be. That doesn't mean, I don't think it means that it doesn't require skill. Some definitely do. I don't know. Do you guys think that games are easy these days? Maybe I'm playing the wrong game.
I mean, I don't know. What's your opinion, Mindi? I find that a lot of these retro games are very difficult, but perhaps because I never played them at the time, so I'm experiencing them for the first time now, but I definitely find them challenging. I don't know, Mindi, what do you think?
It's it's a surprisingly complicated question. Like, for me personally, like I find Mega Man, like the original. Oh, hey, Joe, Mega Man.
Oh,
Yeah.
come
You
on.
like it? Do you hate it?
I like Mega Man too. I mean, I like all the Mega Mans, but I'm not a real big Mega Man fan. But I really like Mega Man 2, which is the easiest one, by the way.
It is. It's also probably the best one of the
Oh,
originals.
absolutely.
Now, that's impressive, isn't it, listeners? Mindi structured the whole beginning of this episode to drop that in there unexpectedly. I did not see Mega Man coming at that point, Mindi. Well played, well played.
46 episodes and you just don't see it coming.
Not that
But
time.
no, for real, I find Mega Man games harder to play now than I did. I think my reaction time is just slowing down with age.
Hmm.
Mm.
Because I grew up playing NES, so I was playing Mega Man and I was playing Castlevania. And I just think I'm slowing up. But there's the whole argument, the kind of gaming conspiracy theory that games like Battletoads were specifically made to be hard because of the rental market.
Yeah, that's actually quite true.
Is it actually true?
Yes,
I wasn't quite sure. Like people say it's true, but I was kind of like, really? Is it really true?
it is because, like, well, if you look at a lot of Genesis games, well, not a lot of them, but plenty of them, like Dynamite Heady comes to mind. Is the first thing that comes to my mind. It's like a lot easier in Japan than it is the U.S. version is, and same with like Contra Hardcore. Uh,
Mhm.
you've got you can get hit a couple of times before you die in Contra on the Mega Drive, but it's one hit deaths in the U.S. version. So I find that kind of
Yeah,
interesting.
I think maybe River City Ransom's like that too, right?
That I don't know, but it's possible.
I know the Japanese version is different than the American one. I just can't, one of them's supposed to be much harder, and I can't remember which is which
There,
though.
there, there are a few games that are easier in the U.S. or the North American versions or the
Mhm.
international versions because they can be the same as the European versions too, than they are in Japan.
I know Kid Icarus, the last. We're just gonna do a retro game show, guys. That's just what we're gonna do tonight. Kid Icarus, the last stage in the Japanese one is a lot harder because the stone backgrounds, kind of when you're flying the final boss. In the North American ones,
Hmm.
it's just a background. In the Japanese version, those are obstacles. Like you actually have to not only avoid the
Oh
enemies, but you
wow!
have to avoid the stone backgrounds.
Yeah, I think for a long time it was thought that North American players weren't as skilled as the Japanese players, so they were making them easier when they ported them over, and then the rental market, boomed like at the end of the 8-bit era, around the 16-bit era, and then some people started making them harder for the North American market.
Mm.
I don't think a lot has changed. If you look at any music rhythm game that's coming out of Asia, there's no question they're more skilled than the rest of the world in the way they
Yeah.
said this. Look, I promise listeners I'm going to drag these two dinosaurs into the modern time shortly. But before I do, now I have a really interesting question because we're talking about this time period, but no one's mentioned it. And it's fascinating to me because, Joe, I didn't really game in this period of time. But of course, the console wars and the proper console wars, compared to what we have today or whatever else, did that, because you were playing at this time, did you side either way? I know you've said now that you play on Xbox and you play on PS4, you play on everything, but at that time, were you a Sega total fanboy, as most of America was converting to,
Well,
or
I don't think most of America was a Sega fanboy, but
Yeah,
I
America was mostly
well, they were
Nintendo.
converting though,
Nintendo
weren't
kind
they?
of won.
Oh, they won in the end.
when I bought the Master System, I totally was totally on Sega, and then
Mm.
the Super Nintendo and the Genesis came out, and the TurboGrafx 16. I was playing everything, and at the time I still did, yes, prefer Sega, but I would, if there was a good game that's on the Super Nintendo, or if a game I wanted was on both platforms and better on the Super Nintendo, I'd definitely buy it on the Super Nintendo because I wanted the better experience. So, yeah, I mean,
Mm.
You were kind of ahead of a curve there.
yeah, I mean,
I think most modern gamers would say, "Oh, it plays better on this, well, I'm gonna buy it on this."
yeah, no,
Back in the day, you didn't have that call. You'd take the worst version, and then you would just kind of puff out your chest and be like, "My version is superior."
yeah, but you see, I was able to have both systems, so I just bought the whatever is the best version. So like if the Super Nintendo version of a multi-platform game, I would just buy that one if it was better.
Mhm.
Like Mortal Kombat, I would, if I didn't buy it, but if I would have bought it on the Genesis because it had, the violence and the blood and stuff like that.
So I know you did a video on this, but I'm gonna ask you for the podcast. My console war question: which one is the better game, Aladdin Super Nintendo or Aladdin
Oh, I
Genesis?
prefer the Genesis version, but honestly, I used to think the Genesis version was like crazy better, but I started playing the Super Nintendo version like maybe a year or so ago, and I have a lot more respect for it now. It's not as bad as I originally thought, because when I first played it, like way back in the day, I was like, "This is stupid. They didn't even try with this." But once you get used to the way it controls, and I actually kind of prefer the graphics on it too, to be honest.
Okay, and then I just have one sort of follow-up question I want to ask comparing then to now. So then censorship was a big thing. Sega was pushing the agenda or whatever else, and I understand that Nintendo and Sega came together to, the ratings and the classifications and all this garbage that the politicians in America at the time thought was required. We now are in a time, interestingly enough, where Sony is moving more and more to censoring games, and I'm talking more Asian games here, obviously. But at the same time, many of these games are getting free reign, if you like, on the Switch, on Nintendo. So we're almost seeing a shift here in what, and I know, I'm hoping you play Switch or Nintendo to have some idea. Do you? And I'm not sure again if you play these Asian sort of games, but what's your take on that? Like, Nintendo is becoming much more open, isn't it?
Yeah.
As opposed to Sony, unfortunately.
I mean, you look at way back when the whole thing was in court with Night Trap, and you've got the president of Nintendo of America saying Night Trap will never ever be on a Nintendo system, and then here it is on the Nintendo Switch. I mean, there's really nothing bad about the game, but
I mean, that whole trial was him just plugging Nintendo.
Right.
He didn't care. Like, watch I'm sure you have, but like CJ,
Oh, yeah.
if you look up the congressional hearings, every time the Nintendo guy speaks, he's just plugging Nintendo. He's like, Nintendo is family
awesome.
friendly and blah 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 blah. Nintendo's so awesome.
Yeah, but I don't. This is the first I'm hearing about the censorships. I mean, I'm not surprised because like I've heard in the past few years about like Street Fighter V being toned down because they didn't like someone's butt or something like that, or something with was it Mortal Kombat in the breasts, or was it some other game? I don't remember.
It was Overwatch, wasn't it? It was Tracer's outfit in Overwatch,
Maybe.
wasn't it?
It was. There was something somewhere. It just escapes me, but I was just kind of surprised. And so that's not going on Nintendo Switch, you guys are saying?
Well, we seem to be in this bizarre position at the moment with Sony. Like, I mean, I don't think there's any maybe quality control at all going on anyway, but then we have these bizarre things like, perhaps I'm not sure if this is the game you're thinking of, but just recently we had Devil May Cry 5, which came out and then was censored after it came out for our shots, and then it comes out on the Xbox. It's not an issue or whatever else. Obviously it's not on the Switch, because capabilities or whatever, but so you've got AAA Western Western leaning games that are doing this, and then you've got, I mean, obviously the Switch is exactly the same in this situation as the PlayStation. There are a lot of Asian games, Japanese games that aren't localized or whatever. So if you're going to play them, you're playing them in the native language. That basically anything goes in these games compared to the Western audiences. Now these versions are being censored on if they are localized, and that's a big if for Sony. Then they are being censored hugely, whereas they're not being censored on Nintendo, which is just. I mean, it's obviously an issue on the Sony, and it's just fascinating because I understand, from the time we're talking retro games, yes, they were pushing the boundaries, but perhaps not pushing them like, they are today. But it's just interesting that we're moving back into this censorship phase in a reverse role, I suppose.
Right. That is interesting.
Well, if you look at kind of the history, what tends to get censored in America, at least, because Australia, you're still kind of quite a nanny state when it comes to censoring video games, right?
Of course, yes.
Or you just won't censor them. You just won't release them.
That's right. Yeah, not for sale at all.
In America, it tends to be the kind of sexual aspects get censored, whether it's in the dialogue or the graphics. Whereas in Japan, it's blood that's more likely to get censored. Blood and overt violence that tends to get censored, at least now.
Yeah, it's just, it's really interesting. I mean, I don't want to deviate into here, but I've been playing some of this AI, the Somnium Files, and it's just, the humor is so Japanese. And I think perhaps if you only play Western games, you would maybe find it a little bit abrupt even, or a little bit, not childish, but just a bit much. But when you immerse yourself a bit in this genre, it's fantastic. And that they got away with it in that game because it's very G-rated, the animation. But there are games like this that are coming that even the dialogue is being altered and stuff, which is, it's a real shame. But look, I suppose it is what it is, and that's a tangent we don't want to open the door on too much at this point, listeners. But what we would like to hear then, Joe, is about what you've been playing in the last, whatever you like. What are you sort of playing at the moment?
Well, outside of doing work for the show, I was going through some homebrew Genesis games on my Mega SD there. I don't know why. I just I think I had to load the thing up because the makers of the Mega SD gave me a firmware to test out for them. They improved the FM sound quality for their Master System games, and I was looking at that. So I was I was like going through all these old Master System homebrews and stuff, and I was just having fun. I was playing Shinobi on the Master System just for fun, and some other Master System games, and then I'm like, oh yeah, there's a demo for Shinobi that's being made for the Genesis. So I was just playing through the third demo of that, which is, it's not complete, but it's really fun, and I don't know, I was just having fun. I keep saying fun.
Well, it's funny because before we started recording that little pre-show, you actually mentioned like playing games for work as opposed to then even wanting to play them for fun. So I just wanted to ask you a little bit about that, because obviously with your content creation, you do need to get through certain things. Are you like when that? Well, I suppose I'm interested in this from my perspective, so I'm going to be selfish and ask: do you find a pressure to play a certain amount of stuff for your content creation?
Oh, well, yeah. It depends on whatever theme I'm doing for the episode. If a game fits into that theme and I feel it should be covered, yeah, I feel absolute pressure to play it, and try to get, somewhere in it. If it's this game I can't get very far in it, then I usually don't include it in the episode, because I'd rather just not talk about it if I can't really talk about if I don't I'm really tripping over my words now. If I don't have the experience to talk about it, I guess.
Yeah, no, I can understand. Okay, so I want to bring it forward. Throw something on PlayStation or Xbox you've played sort of recently. What are you enjoying there?
Ah, wow. You know what I really like on the PlayStation, and I play this one a lot, and I like to show it to people who come over, is Rush of Blood on the VR. And it's just super immersive, because you're just on this little self-propelled roller coaster or cart or whatever, and it's just, you got the move controllers and you're shooting, and that's all there is to it. And it just, people love it, and I love it. And it's that, and Res Infinite is also a really good one, because I've been really enjoying the VR stuff, because it's just so immersive.
They're both early titles for VR as well, of course. Until Rush was from the people who made Until Dawn, an on-rails shooter. Also a fantastic jump scare machine, that game.
Yeah.
Just look left and right. Good. Be very careful. Yeah, no, that is very cool. So, look, Mindi, shall we go into what you've been playing this week?
Sure. Let me ask Joe, if you could pick one retro game, not even to get a remaster, but just ported to modern consoles, what would it be?
That's hard, because there's a lot. I don't really have favorite games. I mean, I have games that are favorite, but I don't like rank them in my mind. I would probably be, it's already out, Phantasy Star, but I would love to see that series revisited, because Phantasy Star is already on the Switch. It's a great port, easy to get through because it has the map and all that nonsense that you didn't have on the original game. But I would like to see them take the Phantasy Star series and go back to it as an RPG, instead of this Phantasy Star Online stuff, which I could never get into. People love Phantasy Star Online, but I'm not really big into playing online games. I played through Phantasy Star Online. I just couldn't really get into it, even though I went through the entire game. But I just want a real Phantasy Star RPG that takes place in that universe.
Do you think it'll happen?
No.
No, not at all?
No. I want it to, though. That doesn't stop me from hoping.
You know what I'm starting to realize, Mindi?
What?
We should have tapped our guest from last week, Sir Boston George, to come and guest host for us this week in my place. He would be very at home in this conversation. I just realized with your Phantasy Star.
Nope. You're not getting out of the Metroidvania episode.
No. No, he's a big fan of all those. But look, let's move on then, Mindi, to what you've been playing this week.
Oh gosh, where did I stop last time? I've been playing a lot of Lego games. I've officially lost my mind and decided that I will in fact platinum every Lego game. Every stack of every Lego game that has come out.
Oh my goodness.
So I've just been cleaning up mostly PS3 Lego games that I hadn't already played.
Mm-hmm.
Being the European stack of Indiana Jones 2 and Star Wars The Force Awakens. So I'm done with PS3 Lego games, thank God. Now my system can stop freezing. I did finally platinum Lego Worlds. That game is no joke. Super boring grind. Broke down and bought a turbo controller. So
is the grind AFK then with a turbo controller or not?
So there's two grinds. One of them is not. One of them is a treasure chest grind. You just have to go and find all the treasure chests. Because the whole thing is everything is randomly generated, right? So you gotta generate a planet, land on it, find all the treasure chests on it, and open it to see if you get this thing you need, these building blocks. And all the treasure chests are randomized. That grind is not AFK. The stud grind, if you set it up the way that most guides will tell you to, as long as you have a turbo controller, something that will push the button for you, then yes, you can set it up and forget about it. And it'll still take many hours. At least you can do something else.
Okay, and then the other thing, because I don't hear a lot about this game at all, but I definitely don't hear a lot of positives about this game. The first Lego game, and I hope I'm not putting my foot in it here, the first Lego game that has been solely online. Does it work, do you think, or not?
That's not solely online at all. I played it offline.
Oh, I thought you had to be connected for this one all the time.
Nope. Maybe you did in the beginning, but you definitely don't right now. No, I try to play offline whenever possible. I've noticed, everyone says Lego games are full of glitches, and they can be. And they say the trophies don't pop. And I always recommend, especially for the 100% trophies, people back up their save files before they unlock it. But what I've been noticing, I actually played to test my theory. I put in Lego Indiana Jones 2, and I played it unpatched. And I played it offline. I had zero problems with trophies popping. I think what happens is something happens when because they want you to connect to their servers. And there is no reason to do that when you're playing. And I think a lot of the glitch, I mean, I'm not saying it's glitchless without it, but I think a lot of the problems comes from just playing the game online.
Interesting.
Yeah. Other games I actually played, I mean, I played everything, but games to actually talk about that are not spam. I played My Memory of Us.
Excellent.
Which is, it's cute. It's in that kind of subgenre that I talked about a little while ago, like 1111 and Valiant Hearts, where it's a war game, but it's about the people in the war, and it's not actually, shoot and kill the bad guys. It's also a really, 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 really obvious allegory about Jewish people in World War II. And it's narrated by Patrick Stewart.
And this is the one that has the very distinctive art style, doesn't it? It's very, I want to say, like a black and white with red. Am I right? There's just hints of red all over.
That's correct. Everything red is bad. It's like a black and white world, and everything bad is red.
Yeah, this is good. And so it runs in chapters, doesn't it? I believe there is a chapter select at the end too for cleaning up and stuff.
Correct.
Now, it is a puzzler as well, loose puzzler. How difficult does that side of it get? Is it all pretty straightforward all the way, or does it develop?
No, it's fairly straightforward. There's one or two timed puzzles you might need like a video guide for, but no, you can play this mostly without a guide. Most of the collectibles are right in your path anyway. There's one or two that are off the beaten path, but if I recall correctly, the chapter select screen will list if you got all the collectibles or not. So, fairly easy play.
I'm glad you got to that. That is an exceptional game. I agree.
Yeah,
it's beautiful.
And then I played Erica. I played in Platinum Erica, but it kind of feels like I've talked about that already.
Well, that's the game that never ends. How many playthroughs is that is required to?
4. It requires 4 playthroughs.
That's a commitment. I don't know about you, Joe, but 4 playthroughs, that's a lot for me.
Joe, do you like FMV games?
It depends on the game. Couple of them.
Like I can't hate them. Most of them are really, really bad, but I can't hate them.
Yeah, I like the ones that just like are over the top. I like that.
Yeah.
I don't like playing them, but I like watching them.
There's just a charm to them though. Like those they were big in the early 90s. There's just a charm. They're so awful. Like if you watch I want to say Corpse
Killer.
It's so awful. Like the acting is awful.
Yeah.
But I can't hate it. There's this weird charm to it, and I'm sure I would have hated it in the mid 90s. But I think looking back on them now, it's just you look and you're like, oh, that's adorable. You clearly only shot this scene once.
Like we did an episode about those FMV games, and we made it so that we were actually our video segments were running on the actual Sega CD for the episode.
You're joking.
Nope. And I recorded are video segments directly from my own Sega CD and Genesis. It's like an earlier episode. I can't remember.
Oh,
which
that's
episode
fantastic.
number
I'm
it
gonna
is.
have to watch that when we're done here.
Yeah, it's called like 16-bit FMV Madness.
See,
Yeah, there it is. Episode 58.
58.
Yeah.
CJ, we will at some point have an FMV game podcast, just so you
Yes.
know.
FMVs, I can't hate them. Excellent, Mindy. That's opened the door for us.
I just need to figure out who to get on because I don't. Maybe Joe, maybe you can come back.
Okay. You probably want to get the guys from My Life in Gaming too.
My Life in Gaming.
Yeah, because they helped out a lot with the Night Trap re-release on the PlayStation 4 and did a lot of the video. I helped out a little bit with it too behind the scenes, but it was mostly them.
Did they help out with the Vita one? Because that one doesn't work.
No. It was just for the PlayStation 4, and then I think Limited Run or whoever picked it up, and they released it on all these other platforms.
Well, whoever did the PS Vita port, it's broken.
Oh wow.
Like it bricks up like 3/4 the way through the game.
Yeah, they didn't do any programming. We just made the video look as good as it could. I think Screaming Villains did the programming.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. It was Screaming Villains. Other than that, it's just a bunch of spam and stacks for site events.
Well, hang on a second, Mindy. There's something on your profile here that intrigues me.
Oh no.
I have many things on my profile, but I do not have an RR. I do not have a double R. What is this? Double R, Sherlock Holmes, Crimes and Punishments.
It means really rad.
Oh.
No, I'm just joking. It means re-release.
Oh, okay.
So, Frogwares, who develops all these Sherlock Holmes games that were put out by Focus Home Interactive, and Focus Home Interactive and Frogwares, their distribution deal contract ended. And so when that happens, games get pulled from the store. It was particularly nasty here because although Frogwares still owns the Sherlock Holmes IP, Focus did kind of a last-minute deal, alteration of the contract, whatever, that said, we own the distribution rights to whatever you have distributed through us, which really screwed them over because Frogwares has been putting out Sherlock Holmes games for quite a while, for about a decade, I want to say, probably a little over a decade. So all of a sudden, Frogwares couldn't sell their stuff, their own games. So they owned their own IPs, but they couldn't put it out anywhere. And so Crimes and Punishments got pulled from the store, from the digital store. And one by one, how they've worked this out, but one by one, they've been putting them back on. So I think Devil's Daughter's back on. Oh, no, that was through Big Ben Interactive. So that's always been fine. But Crimes and Punishments was through Focus. So that got pulled. And when they put it back on the store, it got a new trophy list. So RR means re-release. You don't see it too often.
No, I don't think I've ever seen it, actually. So, yeah, that's very interesting. I'll have to get my 5% there. Good. Anything else Anything else you'd like to throw out?
Everything else is just stacks and spam, so no. Oh, except for I and Me. Stay away from it. It's gorgeous looking, but it's equal parts fun and frustrating.
Yes, yeah. It builds the frustration as the game goes on, which is even better. So
It really does.
Those last
really
two worlds are
does.
fantastic. Yeah. Well, look, listeners, I seem to have played a little bit of everything, which is no surprise to you, and definitely no surprise to me. I know that last time I left off on this AI, the Somnium Files, so I'm further through it, Mindy, and what I've realized is I'm actually only playing, I suppose you could almost say 1 or 2 scenes now a day, and I caught myself doing it the other day, and I'm like, why don't I play more? And I think it's because I'm enjoying it so much, I'm now starting to stretch it out. So I have basically it is a visual novel of sorts, listeners, yeah, with murder mystery elements or whatever else, but those things are very light. It basically plays like a fully voiced VN. It is an interesting way of doing it, though, because the path splits in 2 pretty much at the start, and there are a few little offshoot branches, which you'd be familiar with if you play VNs, but primarily there are 2 distinct paths. Now, with most VNs, the paths, even though they're distinct, they tend to wind into each other, a bit Telltale-esque, if you like. It's been really fascinating, and of course, without spoiling it, to embark now on the second path, having finished the first one, and there is a lot of difference here, Mindy, and they've done it in such such a way that it's now filling in gaps that I didn't even realize were gaps in the first path. So it's sort of with a bit of backstory and a bit of this and that. So look, this game continues to impress me, and I do feel that if you're not a visual novel player, if you're averse to reading, and there is a huge amount of text in this, then perhaps this is a good game for you, because as I said, it is fully voiced or whatever else, and basically all the reading, I suppose, if you like, comes through that dialogue that is voiced. So you can basically watch it as a movie. So I have thrown that out before, and I would continue to throw that out. There is also a fantastic guide for that one. I know when you look at the guide to start with, it looks very confusing if you're used to VN guides, but I would suggest playing through your first run. It doesn't matter which path you get, and then looking at the guide, it will actually make a lot more sense. And it's actually very well written when you realize that. Mindi, it wouldn't be another week if I didn't find a racing game or 10 to play.
Joe, do you play a lot of visual novels at all?
No, the only ones I've really played through, not visual novels, but digital comics mainly, like Snatcher and stuff. I love those. Someone lent me a game where it was just basically, I can't remember what it was called, but it was basically just pressing the button for the next page, and I just couldn't stand that. I was like, I'd just rather read a book.
But I've noticed you played Danganronpa, right?
I wouldn't call that a visual novel. You actually like move your character around and stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of a hybrid.
Yeah.
You got, it's a lot of text, enough that you could call it a visual novel with actual gameplay.
Okay.
This one, no, I keep thinking this is by the Danganronpa guy. It's not. AI the Somnium Files is by the Zero Escape guy, which is a visual novel with room escape puzzles. And Joe, if you like Danganronpa, you might want to try the Zero Escape series, because those two guys are buddies, and they helped each other with their game scripts and gameplay elements.
And there is enough gameplay in it that it's not a straight visual novel. So I think it does, particularly this one and the Zero Escape series. It definitely, and I think, Mindi, perhaps this one even more. I think there's more gameplay in the escape sections and the general detective.
It sounds like it. It's on the short list of my backlog.
Yeah, it's a lot longer than I expected too. I read somewhere that you do it in 20 hours, and I think you'd really have to be powering through it. It's not that sort of game. I think you're going to spend closer to 40 hours if you're investigating. But look, that's fantastic. As I said, listeners, I've taken a bit of a break from racing games for a while. I delved into the narrative. I don't know why, but I did, and now I've definitely come through that and come out. And there's many racing games that I sort of fringed on and jumped off. So without going too in deep to them, I want to just mention this V Rally 4, because I did play it at launch. I wasn't hugely a fan of it, but like all games, it has definitely evolved over time. And coming back to it amazed me, because many of the listeners will know I hold most racing games up to the pinnacle of the Forza series, particularly in graphics and handling, because that is the benchmark. This game is good for a PlayStation racing game. This game is very beautiful, perhaps one of the most beautiful. The sound design is fantastic, so I would recommend even playing this with headphones on. The different sounds of the engine, even the gravel and the sound under the tires. It's very well done. Look, it's not an easy racing game, particularly not easy for the trophies. To win some of these championships is going to be high skill, especially the rally things. But look, if that doesn't worry you, there is a ton of gameplay here. What I like about it too, many of these racing, rally games, if you like, they only focus on maybe rallycross, maybe rally, but this also includes hill climb as well as buggy racing. So in a way, this is almost like the Sebastian Loeb rally racing game we had like 3 years ago, I think. So it's very encompassing. There is a massive amount of online as well, but it can all be boosted by yourself if you have two systems or with another person. If you're playing by yourself, it's very easy because the other person doesn't need to finish the race. So it's in effect AFKing one. And then look, Mindi, I got lost on the Japanese store. It's been a while. It's always an experience. And, I thought, I haven't played something in pure Japanese for quite some time without a guide. Many of these games are guided in some way, and I thought it's time to jump in and try something. And I noticed some comments that this was very easy to work out. Which probably easy if you could speak Japanese. They forgot to say that. But this is the Kandagawa Jet Girls, Mindi. This is an anime series, I understand. I don't know, Joe, we're probably really moving out of your interest zone now. But anyway, this is an anime series of girls that jet ski race, Mindi. Interested?
Anime jet skiing girls?
Yes.
That's interesting.
Scantily clad Anime, yes, yeah. So it plays a little bit like the Senran Kagura water sports game. The name is eluding me. So when you're on these things, you do have a gun. You can turn around and you can shoot your different things. There are 2 girls on each, one driving and one shooting, and you can switch between them if you like. So when you're shooting, it is AI controlled. Look, it's part visual novel, part racing. Also, the good thing about this game is you can just fast skip if you want the visual novel. If you only speak English, if you have no Japanese, it's going to be a little bit challenging because there are a lot of menus in Japanese. But if you have basic Japanese, I think it's okay. You can sort of you can decipher it enough, or Google Translate will help you out. Look, it's overpriced, of course, for what it is because it's on the Japanese store. That's not surprising, but it is really high production value. The reason I mention it is it's also a fairly quick plat, about 8 hours, and it's not a grindy plat or whatever else. There are a lot of racing in it, but there are, I think, about 12 tracks and variations and permutations on those. So look, it's good. I'm enjoying it. I know, as I said, it's a very fringe title, but this game, it possibly will get, I believe, because of the series, localized at some point in the next year or two. So might be one to put on the back burner. And again, the humor, or from what I understand, I may be missing it. It's good. It's very, very, very Japanese, a little bit dirty. Just, I don't know. I love that sort of stuff. But anyway, that is enough.
I mean, as far as you know, it's not in English.
Well, that's true. That's true. And look, I'm going to throw this one out only because I got a tip on this game. I don't know if either of you have heard of this game. I have not had a chance to play it yet. And this is this Grand Blue Fantasy Versus. Has anyone come across this before? By Arc System Works. I take by the silence not. This is an interesting game, Joe and Mindy. This is a fighter/RPG. It's a 2D game, Mindy, and it seems to be done very high production value. I mean, anything from Arc System Works in the fighting genre is fantastic, but this is really weird because it has an RPG mode, or you can play in straight fighting mode as well. It's also co-op. So look, that's a really interesting look. That is getting localized, I believe, listeners, in March. It's coming out in the NA and EU. If you're eager to start early, there is an English version available through Hong Kong or the Hong Kong PS Store. It's actually very reasonably priced there. It is ridiculously priced on the Japanese store. So, is that enough of what we've been playing? Everyone happy?
I think so. I want CJ to talk about Metroidvanias.
Good. So the time has come, listeners. Now, Joe, I'm very excited here because I watched some of your work the other day, and you described what a Metroidvania is, by reading this definition, which has many of these wonderful words: guided non-linearity.
That is a fascinating word.
Utility-gated exploration. I'm sure you're familiar with this. I would like you to explain some of these words to me to start with, if possible. And I'd like to start with a word that I have not heard in a long time, portmanteau. Now, I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that correct. Is a portmanteau of Metroid and Castlevania. What a fascinating word, Joe.
Yeah, I've never heard that word either. So
Wait, CJ, you always said the first question you were ever going to ask the Metroidvania person.
I know, but this is before I found this word.
Oh, fine.
It's a fantastic. So the word means, listeners, if you're interested, portmanteau, it's where you take a word and you blend it with other words. And so they've used it in this essence, Joe, here to say, as a portmanteau of Metroid and Castlevania. So I assume a merging of those things. But I want to.
Yeah, that's kind of obvious.
Yes, well, good for you, perhaps, not for me. I want to start though. We do have that question, but I want to start with what attracts you personally to this genre, this Metroidvania. What do you like about it?
Well, what I like about Metroidvanias is wow, I mean, where do I even start? The action is good. It's an action 2D action game usually. I mean, sometimes 2.5D like you said earlier. But I like that type of gameplay. I like the type of gameplay where you can build up your character and enhance it and go back to areas where you previously couldn't get to with your newfound powers. And that makes exploration a lot more fun. Because you come to a part where it's like, how do I get in there? I can't get in there, but I know I need to get in there, but I just don't know how. And then you get another power. It's like, maybe I can use this power to go back in that one place and get in there. Oh, no, I still can't get in there. I must need some other power. So to some people that would sound annoying, but to me, it's just awesome. It gives me a reason to go back all over the place again and just try to get into new areas. And plus, just the design of the games is just outstanding. I've always loved Castlevania, and I love, their monsters, their music, and the music got really good with Symphony of the Night, and that just helped it as well. And I just really, when it's done right, a Metroidvania style game is just fantastic. I mean, there are plenty of games in that style which I just kind of get bored with, honestly, but never an actual proper Metroidvania.
What are I'm kind of springing this on you. What do you think are Metroidvania games that are not good examples of the genre?
Well, a lot of people might get mad at me for stuff like this, but some of the ones that I've gotten bored with is like Oni. It's a beautiful game. I mean, everything about it is just gorgeous. It looks gorgeous. It sounds gorgeous. It even plays well. But to me, the stage design is just, in the maps, it just doesn't work quite well. I mean, it's not a bad game. I don't want to give off the impression that I don't like it, but it's just one of those where I stopped playing and then I think about, well, should I come back to it? And I'm just like, nah, I just don't feel like it. It's not worth booting up the system for. It's not one of those games like a Metroidvania game where you know what you've got to do, or you have an idea of what you got to do, and you just get this really strong urge to play it.
So let me ask, procedurally generated games are getting kind of big in the indie space, and last year, maybe the year before, we got a procedurally generated Metroidvania game in Chasm. Do you think that's a Metroidvania game?
Well, if it's not Metroid, and if it's not Castlevania, then no, it's not a Metroidvania game. But no, I prefer pre-designed worlds and maps personally.
Because I kind of don't think it is either. I think it's trying to be, but is not a Metroidvania.
Okay, well, this is where it interests me, okay, because you've now made this distinction, so I want to follow up on this before we move on. So there are pure Metroidvania, and then there are games with Metroidvania elements in them. So what is a pure, just for, the uneducated like myself, what is a pure Metroidvania game?
A pure Metroidvania game is a Castlevania game that has elements of Metroid in it. Metroid is not a Metroidvania game. A game that's not Metroid or Castlevania can't be a Metroidvania game. Obviously, Metroid can't be a Metroidvania because it doesn't have any Vania in it. But I don't know what to really call that genre otherwise. Just exploratory platformers, maybe. But yeah, it's a broad term. But to me, a pure Metroidvania can only be a Castlevania game with Metroid elements.
So then, jumping off of that, do you think that Metroidvania as a term, and I'm so mad because I had these questions, and then Jim fucking Sterling did a video bringing all of these points up like 4 days ago. So I'm kind of bummed that I feel like I've missed the bus here. But
And Jim, if you're listening, Mindy does love your work, though.
Yes, the podcast that Jim Sterling will never listen to. Do you think that Metroidvania is a term that should even be used? Do you think we should use the term exploratory platformer?
Yeah, Metroidvania. I mean, if you're talking about a Castlevania game, it tells you exactly what it is. So it's, I think, very appropriate. It doesn't bother me in the least. Now, if you're using the term Metroidvania to talk about a game like Oni or Guacamelee, it's to me that just kind of rubs me the wrong way. It doesn't like make me angry. It's not gonna make me type an angry tweet or anything like that. But it's just, I can see what they're going for, but it's just like it's neither Metroid nor Castlevania. So I don't know.
Okay, well, with that in mind, then, can you give me some examples of games that you think are good, pure Metroidvanias of recent games, I suppose? Well, relatively recent.
Good pure Metroidvania games. Well, I mean, there's always Bloodstained, but that's not Castlevania. But it fits in that genre. So a pure Metroidvania, the last good one was Order of Ecclesia on the DS. And that was pretty good. But my favorite before that, the last really good one, was probably Dawn of Sorrow maybe Portrait of Ruin, because that one was really good too.
That one, thank you. Portrait of Ruin does not get a lot of love.
Yeah. In fact, I like that more than Dawn of Sorrow because it didn't have the touchscreen element.
The stupid touchscreen seals. Yeah.
Oh. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
so let's say for the sake of argument, just going forward, let's say Metroidvania, the way that we're going to use it here today, encompasses pure Metroidvania, but also
just the term broadly used, like, okay, then I would go and say Bloodstained. I really like that one. They did that one mostly right, I feel.
I haven't played it yet. I really want to, but
Oh, you really should. It's good.
I'm trying to be financially responsible and it's not working out too well, so I might just go ahead and buy it.
So, Joe, I find with these sort of games, there's a very steep learning curve for somebody that doesn't have, a background in them or an experience in them. For someone like myself that, is a Metroidvania virgin, if you like, what are some of the tips you would give me to get into these sort of games to help me out?
Well, I don't really feel that the learning curve is that steep. I mean, there's a lot of games that I've played where the learning curve is steep, and I don't think this is really one of them. It's just explore. Be prepared to explore. Be prepared to level up. Be prepared to buy new items. Grind for money. I mean, sometimes you'll need to grind. Personally, I enjoy grinding in games a lot, just as long as it's not ridiculous. So that's never a deal breaker for me. So sometimes I just need to grind before like a boss fight or to buy a certain item that I want or need. But just explore. Maybe there's some place you haven't gone. Keep looking at the map. And if something like that doesn't appeal to you, then you probably won't really like the game as a whole. But I think everyone should definitely try and give them a good go. And, because I don't know, it's just really, to me, really fun just to find new areas and think, where on this map I need to go somewhere. I don't know where, and where could that be? That just really appeals to me personally. So if that doesn't appeal to you, it's probably not going to be a good experience.
Okay, so I want to ask you here about this grind. Now, I read an article that it was it was a very generic sort of article, but it was like good things or things you should avoid in your Metroid game, your Metroidvania stylized game or whatever. And one of the things it said was grinding. It said that grinding should be taken in a different way than an RPG where you may just whack something until you level up or whatever. The grinding should be the exploring and you finding new methods or skills or whatever else that upgrades you in that aspect, not in a traditional grinding sense, and therefore the game shouldn't get easier just because you spend 4 hours whacking something like an RPG would. What do you think about that?
Well, personally, I tend to disagree. I mean, that's one way of looking at it. That doesn't necessarily make it a bad game, but I like grinding. I have fun doing that. I'll just, put on some music I like if I don't like the game music or whatever, and just grind. And to me, that's just fun. It's like very repetitive, and for some reason, it's just super fun to me. It's just one of those things you just do and do and do and just kind of get almost muscle memory doing it. And
Yeah.
some people don't like that because they don't like spending the time. It's too boring for them. I understand, but it's for me. It's hard to. I want to be able to grind if I want to. I don't think it should necessarily be forced. But if I want to spend that extra time to get better, then I should be allowed to do it, I feel.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I understand that. So, what I want to ask you then, and I know we have that question, Mindy, but I don't think we've quite arrived there yet. What I want to ask you is, every year there's a new fad. We had these rogues for a while, rogue games, and then we had roguelike games, Now, I read a lot, and again, my ignorance here, I read a lot that some of these roguelike games, and almost anything now is falling into this category, especially anything procedurally generated. These are of this Metroidvania style. In particular, I'm thinking of Dead Cells here. So what do you think about that? Is that in this genre or vein or not?
Well, it's I'm not very familiar with Dead Cells. I've never really been a fan of anything procedurally generated, and that goes all the way back to Fatal Labyrinth on the Genesis. It's just like if a game, to me, I don't. I'm gonna ruffle some feathers by saying this, but if a game is designing itself as you're playing it, basically, it just feels like the game isn't done. I don't know. It feels like the game doesn't have as much of an identity. It's just making itself up as you go along. And I don't know what its rules are for how it makes itself up, and how it creates each stage or each area or whatever. So it's just, to me, I just like to have a person behind each level designing it. And that's what appeals to me about a lot of non-rogue games, I guess.
So for Rogue, I was thinking about this, and then Jim Sterling brought it up too, which annoys me a little bit. So the term roguelike means it's a game that's like the game
Right.
Rogue.
Right.
And we are all of an age. Well, CJ wouldn't because he wasn't gaming then, but you and I, Joe, are of an age that we remember Rogue.
Mm-hmm.
You know. So do you think that this whole? Because I just think it's an interesting debate, but I also think it's such a trivial debate to be like, should Metroidvania? For me personally, I understand what you're saying with pure Metroidvania versus Metroidvania as an umbrella term.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of feel the same way about adventure games. It's just it used to mean something very specific, and now it's just a very, very umbrella term.
Mm-hmm.
The same happened with roguelike, where they would say it's a game like this, but now it's an umbrella term that covers specific aspects of a game design or how a game plays.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I think there probably was a time when you could say, no, Metroidvania, we're going to use it in the way that you're describing, Joe, where it has to be either Metroid or Castlevania and have these certain play styles in it. But I think it's been so long that it's become just the de facto name for it. There's a word for this, and I can't remember what it is, but it's when a specific example of something just becomes the descriptor of it. So like Kleenex.
Right.
Most people say, "Hey, will you give me a Kleenex?" They don't say.
Yeah.
I mean, some people do, but they won't say, "Give me." But more specifically, they won't say, "Would you give me a tissue?"
Give me a puffs. Yeah.
They won't really say. You won't often hear,
Right.
"Oh, I just need to make a photocopy." Most people say, "I'm going to make a Xerox." And I think Metroidvania fallen
Mm-hmm.
has fallen into this in terms of usage. And one of the arguments is, well, people don't know what, maybe they don't know what Castlevania means, because now Castlevania it's more like God of War, right? Like the Lords of Shadows rebooted it into God of War. But I'm like, but how many people know
Right.
what rogue means now? So do you think this all could be solved if we just called them Metroidvania likes? Like we did with roguelikes.
I mean, it wouldn't hurt my feelings if people did that.
Do you think it's too late?
No, it's never too late. I mean, the language is always changing, so in growing. So I don't think it's too late. It's just, will people jump on board is the bigger question, and call it Metroidvania-like or Metroid-like would probably be honestly the better term, especially since it's shorter. There's always a possibility for that, I feel.
I don't know, man, because gamers, we kind of dig our heels in.
Some of them do, yeah.
Well, I think it's a good point you make, though, Mindy, because, look, I don't actively avoid playing these style of games, but, I don't play them either. So I suppose, in a way, I am actively avoiding them. But then I play a lot of other games that have these elements or whatever here. And so, maybe we can shift a little bit to that, because I wonder if maybe this genre is, metamorphosizing into that to reach, more people anyway. And I'm thinking here of Control. Now, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this game or not, Joe. I know Mindy hasn't played it yet. Fantastic game with a fucked map. And I was talking to someone about it, and they're like, "Oh no, that's just the Metroidvania elements in it. That's what you get. It's map's just garbage. It's so hard to figure out. That's Metroidvania or whatever." Now I don't know. As I said, I don't play enough of these games to know that, but I've played a few. Like I played the Japanese Dead or School, which is a Metroidvania like game. It has a map, like many of these other games that you've talked about so far. This exploration, this one map, if you like, giant map that you're moving between or whatever. Here is. See, this is the crux of my problem with these games, is the map and actually reading the map or stuff. So I understand the exploration, but how do you, maybe you're so used to this is a redundant question, but how do you get your head around that style of game when you're so used to playing games that, for want of a better word, are linear, focused?
Well, if the map sucks, then I can see where you're coming from. It just depends on how they make the map. Like the map on, say, for example, Symphony of the Night and a few of the others it's exceedingly easy to read. And then once you get used to all the different colors they use for like a save room or a map room or this, that, or the other thing, then it's exceedingly easy to read the map. You can just look at it at a glance, you're good to go. But games like this have been around like forever. You know, the Adventure of Link on the NES, Castlevania 2.
Thank you. I feel like I'm in the minority thinking that those could be qualified as early
Yeah,
Metroidvanias.
definitely. I mean, you're definitely going back and forth. I mean, granted, Castlevania 2 doesn't have a map per se.
It also
Um,
doesn't have good translation, but
yeah, there's lots of things about that one. But to answer the part of your question about how do you, go from a linear game to one where you're wandering back and forth, I just think we've been doing that a long time. Like even Wonder Boy 4, Monster World 4 on the Genesis. Well, it wasn't on the Genesis, but it is now. Is a good example. There's been lots of examples throughout time of being able to have an adventure game where you're going back into the same city and out and doing platforming and whatnot. And so I don't think it's too hard to wrap my head around.
I don't mean maybe for you. See, this is the point that I'm coming at is here that, whatever, I know a lot of people play these games, but, compared to your action RPGs and things, this is becoming a more niche category. I mean, I think you would struggle to find people in their early 20s that are as focused on these style of games as, say, people in their 40s, because they've grown up with this or whatever. So the natural progression of this, like everything, is that these...
I see what you're saying.
Elements.
Yeah.
So how do... And, admittedly, I'm probably the oldest one here, as the listener knows I'm ancient, but my background is in these action RPGs, in these open RPGs that even though they're open world, they're still linear. Your Assassin's Creed, your Ubisoft games or whatever.
Yeah.
So how do I shift my mind from suddenly, there's no arrow going this way, and I know it's exploration, but how do I get into that mindset? Do you think?
I still don't think it would be that hard because you just need to know, like, you're just going into it, like, I'm going to need to go back where I came from. And if you can just get that in your brain, I think you'll be okay. It's like, if I can't find anything to do here, go back where I came from, try something else.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it, really.
it really is all down to the map design, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
a good Metroidvania is going to be very linear at the beginning, and then when it
Yes.
starts to open up, it's going to show you pretty quickly, oh hey, you can't go down this hallway because you need, usually it's double jump,
Yeah.
or for like Dawn of Sorrow and some of those casts, you'll see, the room will be split halfway through the screen. You'll see a switch on the other side
Right.
of the door, so oh, this is not a good route to go down. I have to approach it from the other side. So then you start thinking, okay, well, can I go up, and then start working my way in that direction.
Yeah.
CJ, I don't know. You mentioned Control, which I have not played, admittedly, but I probably would not call a Metroidvania.
No, I think it has elements of it in that, especially in the map design. One of my issues with that game, and I think this again comes back to perhaps many of our listeners playing these modern games, is that you see a map, and for again, this is a funny way to think of it, but even though you're in a 3D space, the map is two-dimensional in most of these games you play. And the problem with Control was that it took me a long time to realize that the map is layered. It's actually a three-dimensional map, but you're sort of when you're locked into playing or always looking at if you're playing these big open world games, looking at the map, they're basically these two-dimensional things. You don't have levels and stuff. And I think that's part of my interest in these Metroidvanias is, as you say, is there's different levels. You're moving up as well as across, which to you both is obviously obvious or whatever. But do you think that is an issue perhaps for someone that doesn't play this? My other issue now, I want to ask you both about this because you're both, I know Mindi is a very skilled gamer, and I imagine you are as well, Joe, from what you've said so far. Many of these Metroidvanias, or styled games, these newer ones, and here I'm thinking of the very well received Hollow Knight. They're very difficult as well. So does this go hand in hand? This skill level requirement, do you think, to play some of these games?
Wow. Yeah, I've never really found a Metroidvania that difficult because, again, if I run into an issue, I'll just grind and grind and grind, and then I'll have a lot of money where I can buy better weapons and armor or what have you. And that combined with my levels that I gained by grinding just usually enables me to get through what I need. I like to stay, as a general rule, at least 2 or 3 levels ahead of where I should be. So that's just my mindset of going into it. But I've never really found any of them that tremendously difficult.
Well, and to be fair, CJ, it's not necessarily that Hollow Knight is not easy, but it's not crazy difficult. It's that it's difficult to platinum. I think you're thinking of two different things.
Well, but I mean, the requirements are within the game, aren't they? Or
Well, because they're, one of the big kind of stumbling points for the platinum is like the boss rush. You don't have to do that to beat the game, as far as I know.
Oh, okay.
But you
I
do
see
have
what
to
you're saying.
platinum the game.
Yes. Yeah.
So that would be an instance where it's difficult to, platinum, but you don't have to do it to beat the game. Again, as far as I know, I will admit to not playing Hollow Knight, and I should.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's interesting. So, Ori and the Blind Forest, is that a Metroidvania or not? What do we think?
Well, I mean, if we're going to use the term as an umbrella term, yeah, I think so. I don't know if you level up in that game, though, do you? I know you get new abilities.
That's your question, TJ. That just came in with a whimper. I love it. You didn't. I expected you to do a big, grand build up to it, but no.
Well, look, Mindi and Joe, at this point, if the listener doesn't realize what it sounds like when someone is flailing in the water trying to save themselves from drowning, then continue listening, because this is the point we're at here. Every question I ask, I'm just waiting for Joe to go, oh my God, who is this idiot? Because...
Actually, no. What I'm thinking of now is like, did I call it Oni before or did I call it Ori?
You were calling it Oni, and I was wondering if you meant Ori, because Oni is like a shooter.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, it's like, well, okay, that's like now I feel like an idiot. Can you please edit that so I say Ori? Just paste my word in whenever I say that. I'll give you a clean version right here. Ori.
Thank you. Look, that game has thrown me for a loop as well, so I'm glad someone else.
This game is cursed. You were fine with Ori and the Blind Forest, and then Maka came in and just screwed you up on that game.
Yes, he really did. Yeah,
and
but he was convincing.
Now we've screwed Joe up. This is a problem.
Which is scary too, because I believe the second installment is coming later this year. I think it's this year.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, it's a fantastic game though.
Xbox One exclusive. Still.
Amazing music score. Now, Joe, music, obviously, it interests me a lot. It plays a big part in my life. I'm interested here. You mentioned earlier that music and the scores in some of these earlier games, it's a big thing. That, could you talk a little to that, and perhaps which one has your favorite soundtrack or music tracks? Or...
Wow. Yeah, it's just music in video games is like a really, really, really big thing with me. And that's
excellent.
That's going back to like one of your like way, way, way earlier questions about how modern gaming compares to retro gaming. The music isn't as good these days. Now, that's not to say that there isn't awesome music, but there isn't as much of it, because music in games these days are trying to be like epic movie soundtracks instead of, being like melodic or what have you. It's not something I would want to listen to outside of the game. I mean, granted, again, there are exceptions.
Yeah, because they had a lot less time to kind of hook you onto the song.
Right.
Because there just wasn't the storage space for it. So that's why chiptunes are so awesome, because they either get you almost immediately or they don't.
Yeah. And that continued all the way up until, I want to say, the Saturn and PlayStation era, where music was just amazing. Even I have a folder here with just so much game music. It's insane. But a lot of that is, I don't know how much of it is new stuff. Not a whole lot. But yeah, which has the best Metroidvania soundtrack? That's hard. I would... Symphony of the Night is probably the best.
That's up there.
Yeah.
That's really up there.
There are a few others too. Like, again, going back to Portrait of Ruin, that had an amazing soundtrack for the DS. They all do. The only one that I don't like as much as the others is Harmony of Dissonance on the Game Boy Advance. And it has a few good songs, but it's not as good as all the other Metroidvania games.
That's interesting, because I it's been a long time since I played it, so maybe it's my rose-colored glasses. I didn't mind Harmony Dissonance. Maybe I just convinced myself that it was like the portable Symphony of the Night.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's an excellent game.
I think my lowest one was Circle of the Moon. Like, now that I think about it, I don't even know if I completed that one. That was the one with the cards, right?
Yeah. I definitely completed that. Now I can see why that's like a lot of people's least favorite, because it's very like minimal. Like, there's very little animation in there, and it just feels kind of like rushed together. It uses music from other games and stuff like that, and it sounds very scratchy. Still a great game though.
Yeah, interesting. What you said you're quite interested in music in general in games, so I'd just like to ask a follow-up here. And again, because my experience in these style of games is very limited, does the music what is the purpose? Because we see most of the AAA music, and maybe this is why you don't like it, it's moving down the genre of the film music, that it's supposed to be there, but it's also supposed not to detract from the dialogue and the overall setting. So they're using this layering and stuff like this, and it's all tied up in that or whatever else. But what is the point of the music in these original Metroidvania? Is it the same thing, just to be there almost unnoticed, do you think? Or do you think it takes on its own character in these games?
I think it's to give whatever scene you're in character. It's not meant to be moody like games are these days, or like movie music is. It's just meant to be enjoyed as you play, something to listen to as you play, and to set the mood of the area that you're in. Like, the boss music, it starts getting tense and whatnot. But like these days, games are almost exclusively about story, whereas games back then, story was a secondary thing.
Yeah, it's sort of funny because, like, I see, with this exploration, I know this is a dreadful analogy, but I'm going to say it anyway. And you're exploring and you're doing all this, and the time is just slowly getting sucked up, because something we haven't touched on is that that these games are gonna suck up time because you're backtracking. We haven't covered that or whatever else. And I'm just sort of thinking of this lovely ambient music, say in a casino, where they turn down the lights a little bit, they pump in the oxygen, they play this lovely music that doesn't repeat too closely, and it isn't too moody, as you say, film music, because they want you to sort of get lost in your time or whatever, and enjoy it or whatever, and lose track of yourself. But with that in mind, can we touch on this backtracking? Because, we talk about exploration, so you talk about forward momentum, but there's a lot of, majority of these games is backtracking, isn't it? Really?
It's a lot of backtracking, but it's not bad. A lot of these Metroidvania games are going to be a lot shorter than your modern games that take, 40 hours. Probably the average Metroidvania would be maybe 20-ish hours, if that, if you want to spend a lot of time on it. So it's not really that bad. So I don't think it's a big waste of time. It's not.
Oh no, I'm not implying
yeah, I know.
that.
But it's not like,
yeah.
Like, I think you were mentioning that it takes a lot of time, but it doesn't necessarily make the game longer because of that, compared to like modern games, which a lot of which they're just time vampires. I don't have time to do them.
Yes. Oh, well, full of bloated content. That's right. So touching on that then, obviously once you know a game like this, you know where to go, and whatever else, it makes the experience very short. Does the evil arts of speedrunning interest you at all?
I'm always interested. I never watch an entire speedrun, except like for what was the recent Zelda one, Breath of the Wild. I enjoyed watching people beat that in like 15 minutes or whatever it was. That was just amazing. I think it's cool that people try to do it. I'm not necessarily interested in watching them do it, but I think it's really cool that they have the skills and the knowledge of the game to be able to do it. I think that's pretty awesome.
I watched this. I actually did watch. I'm with you. I don't really watch a lot of speedruns, but I did see this one. I played this Metroidvania, let's call it, game called Time Spinner.
Yeah.
A while back, and I saw this guy speed running it, and he did this because it really is a matter of milliseconds.
Yeah.
And he did this really interesting thing with the way the character's dash and spin jump worked. He got it was kind of incredible. He did the whole thing in like 45 minutes, something like that. And it really was. You watch this thing, he is getting just, a pixel away from enemies and bouncing away. It's really, it's kind of nerve-wracking, actually. Like, there's some speed runs that, like, you're like, okay, you're kind of just doing this just to say that you're the fastest. But then there's some where I'm like, this is actually kind of art. And we're not getting into a speedrun episode here.
No.
But I would imagine that Metroidvania speedruns would be like that, where it would be more exploiting animations to clip through walls and things like that.
Possibly, depending on the game. But yeah, I'm sure there are speedruns out there. It would be interesting to see how far they leveled up by the end of the game.
I find that sort of thing, like speedrunning in this pure form, I find fascinating because, as you said, Joe, it shows a real understanding of the game and a love of the game, because the hours put in to discover all this stuff. And then I find it so amusing, and you'll have to indulge me here, Joe, because speed speeding running platinums, in the platinum community, this horrific thing that we do on the side, in our free time. It's become the other way, where it's not about mastering the game at all. It's just basically how quickly you can piss bolt from the beginning to the end. And these games are very, simplistic in their nature. And so I think it's almost losing its in our community anyway, it doesn't have that depth of understanding of the game and love and all this sort of stuff anymore. Well, that's what I read, which I think is a shame. But I think, I think that depth of knowledge is interesting. That's good. Now, Mindi, you had something there.
Yeah, so let's go back to my first question about what does or does not make a Metroidvania, assuming that we are just going with the umbrella term.
Yeah.
What do you think is essential to point out and say, yes, this is a Metroidvania versus this is window dressing and you can take it or leave it in your Metroidvania?
Two things for sure. One is a map that you can call up at pretty much any time, so you can see where you've been. And then the other is areas where you can't get to, but you can once you get a certain ability. Those two things right there are absolutely fundamental. Leveling up, I think, is optional. Items and swords and all that kind of stuff is optional. You don't necessarily need to be able to buy new equipment or gain new levels or even save your game, honestly. But just as long as you have those two things, I think is absolutely required.
So to you, it really is around how they incorporate the map.
Right.
So it's, you take the guide, the kind of guide linearity of it. I have problems with words when we start recording. I don't know if you've noticed this. CJ, I'm sure you have.
I did non-linearity. It's a fantastic set of words, Mindi.
But, so if you got plopped down into an open world, let's say third-person shooter, right? But it had that same, those same parameters that you've set. I have a map I can open up at any point. There's some places I can't get to now, but if I get my RPG, I can come back and blow up this wall.
Right. Now, I probably should have expanded upon that because perhaps there needs to be three things, and that third thing is it being 2D.
She's good, isn't she? Trapping you. You got to be careful, Joe.
You said no gotcha questions. You'd have no gotcha.
I did say no gotcha questions. Oh.
It's good to see she's doing it to someone else.
That's a got me statement. I didn't even think about that until I was saying it, to be quite honest.
But yeah, I think I was just thinking 2D games when I mentioned my requirements, because I don't consider 3D games Metroidvania. Like, I wouldn't consider a Lament of Innocence a Metroidvania, even though it has that type of gameplay.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's interesting. I forget the PS2 Castlevania games.
Yeah.
Because they're kind of forgettable.
Yes, they are.
But I see where you're coming from. That's where it did kind of shift into getting to more God of War territory.
Yeah.
More Metroidvania than God of War, but it got in there. What about so Velvet used, what did CJ, do you remember what you called them? It was like, you call them 2D puzzle platformers?
Yes, I think she was in my camp of struggling.
So do you think that, so 2D, you said yes map, yes 2D. What about platforming?
Platforming is a big deal, yeah. I mean, your guy he doesn't have to be able to jump on moving platforms, but if you just have a dude wandering scene to scene to scene, then yeah, I think it could still be fit under that umbrella. Puzzle platforming, I think, is a completely different thing.
So then going off of this working cobbled together definition of Metroidvania that we're using today, Wikipedia, their page for Metroidvania games is high.
Like stoned or
yes, like stoned. So I'm gonna pull up some games that I genuinely want to know if you consider them Metroidvania games.
Okay.
But also I want to read out ones that are, if it could be argued that they're Metroidvania games, because I really don't think they are. But I'm not gonna tell you which is which.
Okay.
So going through Batman Arkham Asylum.
Ooh, I haven't played that much, but I would say no.
It's interesting though, because I saw this and it was on my list of Wikipedia is high. This is not a Metroidvania. But I thought about it and I'm like, but it does tick these notes of a map where you can access anywhere, but you still have to get tools to be able to access these places.
Right.
And you've got your boss on paper. of course you look at it and you're like, this is not a Metroidvania. But if you actually break down what this game is, I see why it's called Metroid, even though it's 3D. I would not call this Metroidvania.
Yeah, a lot of games are going to have these kind of tropes in them, where you have to come back later with your newfangled abilities. I mean, there's going to be a lot of games that fit into that category, which is why I'm really glad I finally specified that it needs to be 2D.
The last time we talked about Metroidvania as a term, just kind of briefly, I brought up Blaster Master. What do you think?
Yeah. I think that could kind of fit. I see where you're going with that, because you have to go all the way back to level 1 from like level 3 or 4, I think. No, from level 3, and then go all the way back to level 1 to get to level 4 with your new ability that you got in level 3, if I'm remembering correctly.
Right, but then a good so 2/3 of the game is that. But then like a third of the game is getting out of the tank, and then it's like a top-down shooter.
Yeah, which I don't think makes a difference. You're still looking for something in those things, and you're just, most of those places where you're wandering around in the overhead view, you're looking for the boss, but most of them don't have the boss, so you have to come back out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that really affects it one way or the other, as far as fitting it under that umbrella term, if you were going to.
How about A Boy and His Blob?
I'm not familiar enough with that. I'd have to ask Dave, but
No?
he probably would not say that that's a Metroidvania.
DuckTales Remastered.
No.
Yeah, that's on the list. I don't know why it's on the list.
Just the remastered one, not the original.
Not the original. No, of course
Yeah.
not. No, but it literally, the first sentence says DuckTales Remastered is a Metroidvania-style platform video game. No, it's not.
That is crazy. Yeah, no,
No, it's very much not.
no.
How about Goonies 2?
Yeah, maybe like a primitive kind of one, like almost Metroidvania.
See what I mean? It is kind of difficult.
Yeah, it's kind of primitive one, kind of like Castlevania 2, where I wouldn't quite say Castlevania 2 is a Metroidvania, but it has
It has the elements.
Yeah.
Kirby Superstar.
Kirby Superstar, probably not.
No. Isn't that one like the
That's like
Mario All Stars, where it's just a bunch
Yeah,
of
it's like a
old
bunch of
Kirby
games in one. What the hell?
See what I mean? It's high.
Yeah.
Wand of Gamelon.
Wand of Gamelon. What the hell is that? Legend of Zelda?
Yeah, it's not 3DO.
It's not on 3DO? Oh, the
no,
CDI.
the CDI.
No,
Yeah.
That's not a Metroidvania.
It's on the list.
Well, then it must be.
Adventure Island 4.
Which is Adventure Island 4? What system?
It didn't come out in the States.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm kind of remembering it now. I don't remember enough about it. I'm going to say probably not.
It's more platformy, but I think there is some back and forth. Let's see. Are any of the Metroid games, would they fall under Metroidvania?
Yeah, pretty much all of them.
You think so?
Well, except for the 3D ones. But they still... I would never call a Metroid game Metroidvania. Just Metroid. There's no Castlevania in those games. You're not like attacking with a whip or anything, or fighting Dracula. Sometimes you do, but...
Let's see. How about Milan's Secret Castle?
Milan's Secret Castle. That doesn't seem like a Metroidvania at all.
Have you played it?
Briefly. Dave played that one more than I did. I edited it, but it's nothing seemed Metroidvania about it to me.
I think in terms of that, it's just that you can go back.
Oh,
not that you're required to go back at some point.
Yeah.
And of course, CJ asked about Ori and the Blind Forest, and you said yes?
I said that I think it falls under that, yes.
Yeah. And then how about Prey, the 2007 reboot?
Reboot of what?
The Prey series.
Never heard of the Prey series.
It's a first-person shooter. There's no reason this should be on the Metroidvania list.
Right.
But it's on the Metroidvania list because Wikipedia is high.
Nor is Burnout Paradise a Metroidvania.
Is that on the list? Did I miss that? Because I would have said that.
I wouldn't be surprised. Jeez.
How about this next one? Quackshot.
Yeah. I wouldn't call that a Metroidvania, but it does have the elements.
For one instance, right? You just need to go to a different place and get a key, and then you can go back, right? That's literally it.
More or less. But like there's like, you in the Transylvania, you go into the thing, but you can't do anything about it because you can't jump up on your plungers yet because they don't stick to the wall.
Right.
So then you need to go get the sticky plungers. But I don't know if you need to go to Transylvania first in order to go back and get the sticky plungers. So I don't know if that's required. So it might have some of the elements, but I don't think it's fleshed out enough.
How about Rygar?
No. Wait, the NES version?
The NES. I'm going to say NES for. I hope that's the reason it's on this list.
Yeah, the NES version more so. I don't remember a lot of back and forth in that one. I mean, there's a lot of going all over the place, like a lot of overhead stuff and kind of crazy, that game. But I wouldn't call that a Metroidvania.
How about Strider?
The NES one again, I imagine. I'm not familiar enough with that one. I always get annoyed with that game.
Here's what I think is funny. There's 2 Spider-Man games on this. I don't think either of them are Metroidvanias. Shattered Dimensions and Web of Shadows. I'm just going to go ahead and say no.
Oh, Web of Shadows. Is that the 32X one?
No, I think they're both PS3.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then we've got Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3.
What?
I told you this list is high. It's funny, though. Oh, actually, legitimate question. What about the Dizzy games?
Ooh, you know what? I play about 5 seconds of Dizzy, and then I get dizzy and shut them off.
So you would not feel qualified to answer.
Europeans are going to hate that if they listen.
Well, what are our
Correct.
European listeners? We got Sweden, right?
Sorry. Just excuse me a moment, listeners. I'm just adjusting the noose. It's almost at the right tension at this point. So, look, I feel like, one of those school kids that studied, I've done this massive cram session all night. I know the test is coming up and I still know I'm going to fail. This is fascinating, but it's well out of my depth here. So I'm going to let you keep going. I'm learning a lot, though. I'm enjoying it.
Well, if you haven't noticed by the game titles, I'm almost done here.
Oh, that's okay. Many of these games I've never heard of, so it's very interesting. I'm enjoying it.
Wario Master of Disguise.
I don't recall that one. There's a lot of
Yeah, I remember I definitely played this game. It's a platformer game on the DS, and Wario's got a bunch of masks, but I can't remember at all.
Okay, now I'm looking at the same list you are, and I'm saying that they have Vampire Killer on here, which is the MSX version.
Which is Castlevania.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't even know if I would describe that as a Metroidvania. That's less of a Metroidvania than Castlevania 2.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't call the original Castlevania Metroidvania at all. I would just call it Castlevania.
No, I mean, it's not the original Castlevania. It was made at the same time, but you kind of wander around. It's not linear, but it's not really a good game.
Oh, it's the MSX 2. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's I wouldn't Wonder Boy 3 maybe. Not Wonder Boy in Monsterland, no. Definitely not Wonder Boy in Monster World, sorry. Maybe that one.
I think I've passed all the funny ones, but there's stuff that I kind of look at and I'm like, well, maybe like Goonies 2, maybe like a proto Metroidvania. Yeah. And in that same vein, maybe Xanadu. Yeah. That feels more like a Zelda game, though. So I could see the argument of maybe we shouldn't use this as a term, but like I said before, I'm in the mindset of I think it just is what it is now, where roguelike has been accepted, and one of the arguments about Metroidvania is, well, what if I haven't played Metroidvania, I haven't played Castlevania, it doesn't describe the kind of game it is. And I'm like, well, roguelike doesn't really either, but for some reason we're not having this debate about roguelike, and we are having it about Metroidvania.
I think people they just don't like the name for whatever reason. They don't like the way it sounds, or they don't like the butchering of the names, so they just take exception to it. Roguelike, only old people know what rogue is. So
this is perhaps a problem that will not be an issue in 10 years, Joe.
Maybe. No, it will be. It will be, because there will still be old people who will be on the internet making noise.
That is true. Unfortunately, they seem to be hanging on a lot longer these days, don't they?
It'll be a while before we're all dead.
That's fascinating, Mindy. Is there anything else you'd like to pursue along that line, or?
No, I wanted to end with that fun game of can you believe what Wikipedia is saying about this?
So it sounds like the perfect time then to move over to our shoutouts for this week from the Push2Plat Platinum community. Remember, it's a free-to-join community on the PS4. If you'd like to have your plats read like these ladies and gentlemen, then please sign up and post those pics. So to start us off this week, we have Gaz Davis, number 48, Life is Strange Before the Storm. Hella impressive, sir. Dat one, Seagull. Just proving you can't take the spam out of the seagull. Number 207, Super Weekend Mode AS Vita. Number 208 and 209, Zerotopian Invasion AS PS4 plus Vita. Zador VP is back. Number 452, Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix PS4. And if you're around the Discord, please say hello to Zador. He is a wonderful gentleman who's taken on mod duties for us now, and greatly appreciate what you're doing, sir. Thank you. Beastie 4635. He's back with a new account, a new name, same spam. Number 1 through 3, Hoggy 2, Slide, and Little Adventure on the Prairie. They are the staples of the spam library, so it's great to see you started off this account with them. Scottish Noob is back, 344 Read Remastered. De Easty, as usual, another 2 big games, 627 Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, and number 628 Riptide GP2. The Real 3 Spooky 5U racks up 100% in Blacklight Retribution. And to see us out this week, listeners, just in the nick of time, the wonderful Eigenspace, number 95, Forgotten Anne, onwards to her journey to number 100. Congratulations, everyone, this week. So back to you, past CJ, to round out this Metroidvania extravaganza. So once again, thank you, Joe, for joining us. It's been a great pleasure today to learn more about Metroidvanias.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Now, if our listeners were trying to find you, how would they do that?
They could go to www.youtube.com/Mr. GameSack.
Well, I don't know, listeners. What do you think? I won't lie, I was a little bit nervous coming into this episode, but it has been very informative for me. I've learned a ton and had a lot of fun being guided through Metroidvanias by Joe and Mindi. It's clear they have a passion for this genre and style. And look, I'm not going to lie, I may well be left a miserable little pile of CJ in the corner after this episode, but I'm glad we took this voyage together, listeners. And look, if you're glad, come and say hi to us. We are available on Twitter at push2plat, push the number 2plat, or you can send us an email at push2plat@gmail.com. If you want to help us out further, jump on YouTube and sub to us. It's all free and really helps us out. If you really want to help us out, then check in the show notes for a link to our newly formed Patreon page. It just helps Mindi and myself to continue to grow this show and reach further and further for guests around the world. So on behalf of Mindi and myself, I'll close us out here. Have a wonderful week. May the platinums be kind and the trophies plentiful. We'll catch you next week, friends. Have fun.